Chapter 12. Mission Accomplished. It was another beautiful morning, and the sky was clear and a very pale blue. Hare got up early and went to sit on a bench in the garden. He sprawled, absorbing the penetrating warmth, and tried very hard to retain the memory of it. In a few days he would be returning to London, to his dear old Devon, and to the damp of an English winter. He tried not to think about it. He tried very hard not to think of Heathrow and the agony of frozen feet and tempers brittle, breaking, acid and aching. Today was the last day of the old year. It was also the date they had chosen for Lucifer's banquet. I am celebrating my last day on this beautiful continent by going in search of a fine wine. I promised to bring cook a bottle of the finest Cape wine. "Who will come with me?" cried Hare, when the others emerged, looking for him to go into breakfast. "Of course we'll come," said Crawler. "I believe they do a very good lunch under the oak trees at Lanzerac. We shall jump in the car and set out for Stellenbosch. We shall see more of the lovely countryside with its vineyards and fields of strawberries," said Hare. They wore light clothing and sandals, as it was going to be a scorcher. It was a delightful drive through rich vineyards and old farms. They saw an ancient wine press and drove through the old university town of Stellenbosch, serene under its canopy of old oaks, with its wide thoroughfares and cool whitewashed Cape Dutch cottages and town houses. They drove through the gates of Lanzerac and up to the car park. There were the original buildings of the old Dutch farmhouse, which had been skillfully extended to form a square of elegant buildings in the same style. They sat on the terrace under an old oak tree and ordered a bottle of white wine and a salad lunch, which they ate at a low table in the dappled shade. Hare liked the home-baked bread and ate up Crawler's slice as well, as he was putting on weight, and chose a fruit salad with cream instead. After lunch, they continued their drive and then returned to Cape Town, in time to take the cable car to the top of Table Mountain. They motored up a twisting mountain road until they reached the building which housed the cable. "Sweef spoor Stasie," said Crawler out loud. "I don't like the sweef part. I haven't a head for heights, and sweefing alarms me." "Don't be so silly," said Hare, holding him firmly by the elbow and purchasing 2 tickets. Lion had decided to take the path and had bounded up the mountain and been lost to sight. "You will overtake me, I know, so wait for me at the top. Have a coffee in the restaurant." "No," he said before going. Down came the cable car, and they clambered in, while it swayed. Then the giant cable gave a tug, and away they flew, while the photographer below them took a photograph of them all hanging out of the windows and waving cheerfully. Up she swung, higher and higher. "Oh," groaned Crawler. "Look at the view," cried Hare. "I can't," said Crawler, turning green. "My eyes are shut tight." "Come on, hold my hand," said Hare reassuringly, and Crawler took a peep, and then another peep, and then he was staring, fascinated, at the view out to sea and over the town, and then at the fast-approaching rock face of the towering mountain. Halfway there, they passed the other car coming down, with a young man inside it. It was weighted down with bags of sand, as there were very few passengers. "He looks quite cheerful," said Crawler, and let go Hare's hand. There were a few climbers on the path below them, but Lion wasn't visible. He had probably chosen his own route to the top. With a clang they arrived and climbed unsteadily out, while the wind buffeted them playfully, as if it was slapping them on the back and congratulating them on their nerve. They went inside an attractive low stone building and ordered a cup of coffee and a cheese sandwich each. It was served by a student, and next to them was an Indian family out for the day. The woman wore graceful saris and smiled kindly at the odd couple beside them. Lion bounded in and nearly knocked a coffee cup off the table with his enthusiastic tail. "It's wonderful," he boomed and sat down. "Come outside and we'll take a walk along the top." "Ladies and gentlemen, unaccustomed as I am, it gives me great pleasure to address this august company, tra-la, tra-la, tra-la," said Lucifer, struggling with his white tie in front of a badly mildewed old mirror. "Blast! Damnation!" He dropped the collar stud and went down on hands and knees to look for it. Poor Lucifer had no guardian angel upon whom to call for help in locating the missing object, no saint to invoke and bring speedily to his aid. "Ah, well, I shall be late, late, late," he grumbled and groped, prated and poked under the bits of furniture about the room. He found it eventually down his shirt front, where it had caught as it fell. The suit was a trifle tight, but he would endure the discomfort. "Recognition at last," he cried. "A banquet! Oh, how very fitting!" And he snatched up his old top hat and gold-headed cane and made his way briskly to the cable station at the bottom of Table Mountain. The young man eyed him curiously when he sold him a ticket. "This is the last car going up, sir," he said. "The cloud is building up upon the other side of the mountain, and it could become dangerous." "Take me up, boy," said Lucifer, frowning fiercely. "I've an important function to attend." "Yes, sir," said the boy, stepping back and closing the gates. The car swung upward in the darkened sky, bearing the Prince of Darkness aloft. Alone, so alone in his black tails and patent leather shoes. At the top he stepped out onto the windy heights. The city lay below him, glittering quietly. A dog barked somewhere far below, a mournful one-note call, while above him the Milky Way floated like a white veil trimmed with stars. He walked along the well-trodden path, hopefully listening for the sounds of the other guests, the strains of an orchestra, or a toastmaster praying silence for. Silence hung about him like the warm cloak that he had left behind in his hurry to attend the banquet. He wished he had had it with him now. Around his feet the soft white moisture rose until it reached his knees. He could hear the siren calling the people to return to the cable station. Conditions were too dangerous to remain up there any longer. The cloud rose to his chest, and he called out, "Anybody there?" His voice echoed hollowly, and the wind blew it back at him, so that it sang around his ears. He groped his way further and further along. There was nobody about, only the tablecloth, rising like a tide, billowing up to his chin. Extended soft arms and clammy fingers covered his eyes. Dew dropped from his hat and ran down his nose, and he dropped his white gloves and tripped over his cane in the blanketing gloom. He was probably on the edge of a precipice. He shivered. He was trapped. He could not move for fear of falling over the edge, and he sat down dismally, his head between his knees. There would be no dinner for him tonight, and no applause. That was how they found him the next morning, when the cloud lifted and the first cable car made the ascent. After numerous cups of hot black coffee, he was able to move his cramped limbs. They wanted to know how he came to be dressed in this bizarre fashion. White tie and tails on the top of the mountain? Lucifer did not feel inclined to answer their questions, and he pretended that he had lost his voice. His clothes were soaking, and he decided to take a walk along the contour path, away from curious eyes, in order to dry his clothes and ease the stiffness in his limbs, before returning home to spend the rest of the day in bed. His pride had received a mortal blow. He felt sure it would be all over the papers the next day, how the principal speaker had failed to attend a sumptuous dinner held in his honor, how the noble guests had waited and waited until the soup grew cold, the fish leathery, and the meat past recognition, How the jellies had flopped sideways off the polished plates, and the flambés had run out of brandy. How the mayoress had fainted from the strain, and the chef, armed with a hatchet, had run about threatening to get even with the culprit as he watched his masterpieces ruined. If he had not been late, he felt, he might have reached the assembled guests in time. But there was no turning back the clock now. He was to blame. His was the shame. He would go away. He would seek some hidden lair and retire. Retire? He would retire disgracefully.